I remember the exact moment. The sun was bright that afternoon. The kind of bright that makes everything look beautiful on the outside, even when something ugly is happening right in front of your eyes. I was standing near the back of the reception hall, a big, decorated room with white tablecloths, flower centerpieces, and people in expensive clothes holding champagne glasses and laughing. The kind of room I had never belonged in. I knew that. I had always known that. My name is Harold James Whitfield. I am 63 years old. My hands are rough from 30 years of working construction. My shoes, the ones I wore that day, I had polished them the night before. I polished them for 40 minutes because I wanted to look right. I wanted to look like I deserved to be there. I wanted my son to look at me and feel proud. I had driven 4 hours to get to that reception. 4 hours alone in my old truck, with a card I had written 3 times because I kept messing up the words, and a small gift wrapped in brown paper because I could not find the fancy wrapping they sell at the nice stores. I was not invited. Let me say that again, because it matters. I was not invited to my own son's medical school graduation reception. I found out about it the way a stranger finds out about things, through a photo my nephew posted online. There was my son, Marcus, in his white coat, standing in front of a banner that said Dr. Marcus Whitfield Class Celebration. I sat in my kitchen and stared at that photo for a long time. Then I got up, polished my shoes, and drove 4 hours, because that is what fathers do. Or at least that is what I thought fathers did. I want you to stay with me here, because what happened next, what Marcus said to the security guard at that door, that is something I have replayed in my mind every single night for the past 8 months. And I need you to understand the full picture before I tell you the twist, because there is a twist in this story. A twist that changed everything. A son I built from nothing. Marcus was born on a Tuesday in November. I remember because I had just come off a 12-hour shift at the construction site, and I had concrete dust in my hair when the nurse put him in my arms. My wife, Beverly, she was exhausted and beautiful, and she looked at me and said, "Harold, don't you dare drop him." I laughed. I held that boy like he was made of gold, because to me he was. Beverly and I, we were not rich people. We never pretended to be. I worked construction. Beverly worked at the school cafeteria. We lived in a small house on Decker Street with a leaky bathroom faucet that I kept meaning to fix and a backyard that was more dirt than grass. But we had love. Lord, we had so much love in that house. Marcus was our only son. We also had a daughter, Patty, we called her, who was 4 years older than Marcus and twice as sensible. Patty was the kind of child who made you feel like you had done something right in life. She helped with dishes without being asked. She read books for fun. She called on Sundays. Marcus was different. Marcus was brilliant. And brilliant children, sometimes they grow in directions you don't expect. From the time he was small, Marcus was sharp. His teachers used to pull me aside at parent-teacher conferences and say, "Mr. Whitfield, your son is exceptional." And I would drive home afterward feeling 10 feet tall. I worked extra shifts to put Marcus in the better school district. Beverly gave up her small savings to buy him the science kit he wanted for Christmas when he was 10. When he said he wanted to be a doctor, I did not laugh. I did not say, "Son, boys like us don't become doctors." I said, "Then we're going to make that happen." And that promise, that quiet promise I made to a 10-year-old boy in a dirt yard house on Decker Street, that promise is the heart of this entire story. Marcus got into college on partial scholarship. The rest, Beverly and I covered. We refinanced the house. I took on weekend jobs. I drove a delivery truck on Saturdays and poured concrete during the week. Beverly never complained. Not once. When Marcus got into medical school, we cried. All three of us, me, Beverly, and Patty, sat around the kitchen table and cried happy tears. But Beverly was already sick by then. She had been diagnosed with early-stage kidney disease 2 years before. The doctors said it was manageable. They said with the right care, she could live comfortably for many years. What they did not say was that Marcus, once he left for medical school, would call less and less, that the visits home would shrink from holidays to occasional to almost never. What they did not say was that Beverly would cry sometimes on Sunday nights after she had waited all day for a call that did not come. I never told Marcus about those Sunday nights. Maybe I should have. In his second year of medical school, Marcus met Diane. Diane was a different kind of person. She came from money. Her father was a cardiologist. Her mother sat on charity boards and wore scarves that cost more than my truck payment. Diane was not a bad person, I want to be fair, but she had a way of looking at things and people and sorting them into categories. Useful and not useful, impressive and not impressive. I watched her sort me the first time Marcus brought her home for Thanksgiving. She looked at our house, our small, clean, honest house, and she smiled the way people smile when they are trying not to show what they are actually thinking. She called me Harold instead of Mr. Whitfield. She whispered something to Marcus in the kitchen while I was carving the turkey, and he came out afterward and said, "Dad, Diane thinks it might be better if we do holidays at her family's place. Going forward, they have more space." I just nodded. Beverly squeezed my hand under the table. That was the last Thanksgiving we spent together as a family. When your own child starts to erase you, over the next 2 years, Marcus changed, not all at once. That is the thing about this kind of change. It happens slowly, like water wearing down stone. You barely notice each small thing. But one day you look up and the stone is gone. He stopped calling every week, then every month. He started correcting the way I spoke when Diane was around. Once, at a dinner, the one time they came to visit in his 3rd year, I used the word ain't, and Marcus looked at me with this expression on his face. Just for a second, but I saw it, that look, the look that said, "You embarrass me." I pretended not to notice. Beverly noticed everything. Beverly always did. After they left that visit, she sat next to me on the porch and said, "Harold, our boy is getting lost." I said, "He's just busy, Bev. Medical school is hard." She shook her head. "It's not the school. It's the company he's keeping. She's teaching him to be ashamed of where he came from." I did not want to believe her, but Beverly had never been wrong about people in her life. Beverly passed away 14 months before Marcus graduated. She died on a Wednesday morning in March, quietly, the way she had lived, with dignity and without fuss. Marcus came to the funeral. He sat in the front row in an expensive suit. He cried, and I believe those tears were real. Whatever he had become, whatever wall had grown between us, I believe he loved his mother, but he left the same afternoon. Said he had rotations he could not miss. Patty stayed with me for 2 weeks. Patty held my hand at the gravesite. Patty cleaned out Beverly's closet because she knew I couldn't do it alone. Patty sat with me at the kitchen table at midnight and let me talk about her mother for hours. Marcus sent a flower arrangement to the reception after the funeral, a nice one, expensive, with a printed card from a florist. Not handwritten, printed. I put it in the corner of the living room and looked at it for a long time. Then I set it outside. After Beverly died, I threw myself into work. There was not much else. Patty called every day, which kept me breathing. But the house on Decker Street was very quiet, and it was during those quiet months, in the evenings after work, that I made a decision. A decision that I told no one about, not Patty, not my brother Raymond, not a single soul. A decision that would, 14 months later, become the most important thing anyone in my family had ever learned about me. But I am getting ahead of myself. Stay with me. I polished my shoes for a son who didn't want me there. The graduation ceremony itself, the actual ceremony at the university, I watched it on a live stream. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and watched my son walk across a stage on a small laptop screen and accept his medical degree. I saw Diane's family in the audience, her father, her mother, 2 sets of grandparents, a whole cheering section of people who had known Marcus for 3 years. I was not there. I had not been told about the live stream either. I found that by accident, searching online. I watched my son shake hands with the dean and hold up his diploma. I watched him hug Diane. I watched him laugh with her father. I sat in my kitchen and I smiled. Because in spite of everything, in spite of the distance and the silence and the slow erasure, I was proud of that boy. He had done what we said he would do. He was a doctor, a real doctor. And somewhere inside that man, in the expensive suit on that stage, was the 10-year-old boy from Decker Street, who used to come home with holes in his sneakers and stars in his eyes. I was proud. I am still proud, even now, even after everything. That is the complicated thing about loving your children. The pride does not go away just because the pain arrives. The reception was the following Saturday. I found out through my nephew Darnell, Beverly's sister's boy, who had seen photos on social media. He texted me, "Uncle Harold, did you know Marcus is having a big graduation party? Looks fancy. You going?" I stared at that message. I had not been invited, but I thought maybe it was an oversight. Maybe in all the busyness of graduation week, Marcus had simply forgotten to send me the details. He was my son, my only son. Surely he would want his father there. I called Marcus. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. I said, "Son, congratulations. I am so proud of you. I heard about the reception Saturday. I would love to be there if that is all right. Call me back." He did not call back. I called again Friday morning. Voicemail again. This time I did not leave a message. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about Beverly. I thought about what she would tell me to do. Then I got up, ironed my good shirt, polished my shoes, and decided I would go. Not to cause a scene, not to embarrass anyone, just to see my son on the most important day of his life. What father would not do that? Security. There's a stalker at the entrance. The reception was held at the Harrington Grand Hotel. When I pulled into the parking lot in my old truck, I sat for a moment. Through the big glass windows I could see people inside. Dressed beautifully, moving around with drinks in their hands, laughing. I checked my shirt, straightened my tie, picked up my card and my wrapped gift. I walked to the entrance. There was a young man at a welcome table just inside the lobby. A guest list. He asked my name and I told him. He ran his finger down the list twice. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see a Harold Whitfield on the list. I'm his father," I said. Marcus Whitfield's father. Perhaps there was a mistake. The young man looked uncomfortable. "Let me just check with the host." He made a call on his radio. I stood there, holding my card, and I waited. And then I saw Marcus. He came through the crowd toward the entrance with Diane beside him, and 2 of her brothers just behind. He was in a dark suit. He looked good. He looked successful. He looked like everything we had worked for. And when his eyes found mine, I saw it, that flash of something, not joy, not surprise, not even guilt. Something harder than that. His jaw tightened. He said something to Diane. She glanced at me and turned away, saying something to her brother. Marcus walked to the entrance table and stood in front of me. I smiled. I said, "Son, congratulations, you did it." I held out my arms. He did not move. He looked at me the way you look at a problem you need to solve quickly. And then he turned to the security guard who had appeared at his elbow, a large man in a black jacket, and Marcus said, in a voice loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "This man is not Guessed, he has been contacting me repeatedly without my permission. I'd like him escorted out, please. He's been harassing my family. Someone nearby gasped. The security guard looked at me. I stood very still. I felt the card in my hand, the card I had written 3 times. I looked at my son. He did not look back at me, and I understood then, in that cold, clear, terrible moment, that this was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a choice, a deliberate, conscious, calculated choice. My son had just called me a stalker at his own graduation. The security guard touched my arm gently. He was a decent man. I could tell by the softness of his voice when he said, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I nodded. I set the card and the gift down on the welcome table. I turned around, and I walked out. I did not say a word. Not a single word. Some people think silence in a moment like that means weakness. They are wrong. My silence in that moment was the strongest thing I have ever done in my life. Because what I was carrying in my silence, what I had been carrying for 14 months without telling a single person, was about to change everything. Part 6. The twist what nobody at that reception knew now. I need to stop here, because this is the part of the story that I have never told in full. Not to Patty, not to Raymond, not to anyone, until now. I need to go back 18 months. Just before Beverly passed, she had a conversation with me that lasted most of a night. We sat in the bedroom, her in bed with her oxygen nearby, me in the chair beside her, and she talked to me about Marcus, about her fears for him, about the direction she could see his life going. She said, "Harold, I'm not worried about whether Marcus becomes a great doctor. He will. He's too smart not to. What I'm worried about is whether he becomes a good man." I held her hand and listened. She said, "When I'm gone, there's going to be no one to hold that family together except you. And I know you, Harold Whitfield. I know you will keep giving, keep showing up, keep loving, even when it costs you." She paused. Then she said something that surprised me. "But this time, I want you to protect yourself. Will you do that for me?" I promised her I would. What Beverly did not know, what no one knew, was the full story of Marcus's medical school funding. Here is what everyone believed. Marcus had a partial scholarship, some student loans, and help from his parents. Here is what was actually true. For the past 6 years, Marcus's medical school education had been funded almost entirely by a private scholarship called the Whitfield Educational Trust. I had set it up 3 months before Marcus started medical school, with the help of a lawyer named George Totham, who had been my friend since we were 18. I had used the money from my father's life insurance money my father had saved for 30 years working in a plant, and had left to me with the specific wish that it go towards something that lasts. The trust was set up as a private educational scholarship with one legal provision, one condition, that Marcus never knew about. The condition was this: the scholarship funds could be revoked at any time by the trustee, me, if the trustee determined that the terms of the trust had been violated. The terms were simple. They had been written in plain language on a single page. They said only this: this scholarship is given in the spirit of family, sacrifice, and respect. Should the recipient demonstrate a willful and sustained abandonment of the family values and relationships for which this fund was established, the trustee reserves the right to reclassify all disbursed funds as a personal loan, immediately due in full, $517,000. That was the total amount disbursed over 6 years for tuition, housing, books, fees, and living expenses. $517,000 that Marcus thought was a scholarship. That was, in fact, legally binding, signed and notarized, a loan. A loan that, as of the moment I set the card and the gift on that welcome table and walked out of the Harrington Grand Hotel, I had already decided to call in. I want to be clear about something. I did not make that phone call out of anger. I made it because of a promise. A promise to a woman who knew her son better than he knew himself. A woman who told me, from a hospital bed, to protect myself. That evening, 4 hours back home in my truck, quiet road, radio off, I called George Totham from a rest stop. I said, "George, it's time," he said. "You sure, Harold?" I thought about the security guard's hand on my arm. I thought about the card sitting on that welcome table. I thought about Beverly's Sunday nights waiting for a call that never came. I said, "I'm sure." George said, "I'll have the papers sent Monday." 30 minutes after I left, his world changed. Marcus received the certified letter on a Tuesday. Patty called me that same Tuesday afternoon. She had gotten a call from Marcus, frantic, confused, barely coherent. She said, "Dad, Marcus just called me. He's saying something about a loan, something about over $500,000. He's saying there's a law firm involved. Dad, what is going on?" I said, "Patty, sit down. I'm going to tell you a story." I told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then Patty said very quietly, "Daddy, you paid for all of it. Your grandfather paid for all of it. I just held the money for the right time." Another silence. Then she said, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She said, "Mama knew, didn't she? She knew." Patty cried. Not loud, dramatic crying, just quiet, steady tears. I could hear them. She said, "What happens now?" I said, "That's up to Marcus." Marcus called me that same evening. First call, I did not answer. Second call, 20 minutes later, I did not answer. Third call, I picked up. He was not crying, not yet. He was in a state I had never heard in his voice before, a kind of rattled, disbelieving panic. He said, "Dad, what is this? What is this letter? Is this some kind of joke?" I said, "No, son, it is not a joke. $500,000. You're saying I owe you $500,000. Dad, that doesn't make any sense. I had a scholarship. You had a trust." I said, "There is a difference. George Totham can explain the legal difference to you in detail if you would like." "Dad, Marcus." I kept my voice very calm, very even. "Do you remember what you said to the security guard on Saturday?" Silence. "Do you remember the words you used?" More silence. "You called me a stalker at your graduation reception, in front of a room full of people. You had a security guard escort me out of the building. You left my card sitting on a table in a hotel lobby." I heard him exhale. "Dad, Diane's family was there, and I didn't want. I drove 4 hours to see you." I said. I polished my shoes. "I wrote you a card 3 times because I kept getting the words wrong. I wanted to get the words right for you, Marcus. And you called me a stalker." He said nothing. "Your mother spent her last years waiting for you to call on Sundays. She never told you that. I'm telling you now. She would sit by that phone on Sunday evenings and wait. And most Sundays it never rang." I heard something change in his breathing. "I am not calling in this loan to punish you," I said. "I am calling it in because your grandfather, a man who worked in a factory for 40 years and never had a sick day, saved that money so that our family would have something that lasts. And what I watched you become over the past 3 years, that is not what he saved it for. That is not what your mother worked the cafeteria for. That is not what I poured concrete for." Marcus said, very quietly, "Dad, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's the saddest part." And I hung up. When the people who were watching started asking questions, what happened over the next 2 weeks, I could not have predicted. Diane's father called me, Dr. Philip Garner, cardiologist, man who had never spoken a direct word to me in 3 years. He called me on a Thursday evening and said, "Mr. Whitfield, I think we need to have a conversation." I said, "I agree." He said he had become aware of the situation through Marcus. He said he wanted to understand the full picture. He was, I will give him this, a man who respected facts. When I told him the full history, the trust, the conditions, the years of gradual estrangement, I heard his tone shift. He said, "Mr. Whitfield, I was not aware of the circumstances of Saturday's reception." "No," I said. "I imagine you were not." He cleared his throat. "My wife and I, we were under the impression that you and Marcus had a strained relationship due to mutual difficulties. We were not told." "You were not told," I said gently, "because the person who would have had to tell you the truth was your son-in-law, and the truth was not flattering to him." A long pause. "No," he said, "I suppose it was not." He apologized to me. Philip Garner, cardiologist, a man who had forgotten more money than I had ever earned. He apologized to me. Harold Whitfield, construction worker. I thanked him. I told him I bore no ill will toward his family. I told him the issue was between me and my son. Diane called Patty. Patty told me afterward that the call lasted almost 2 hours, that Diane cried, that she said she had not known, truly had not known, the full extent of what Marcus had done and had been doing, that she had known about tensions with his father, but had not understood what she was a part of. "Do you believe her?" I asked Patty. Patty thought about it carefully. "I think," she said, "that she believed the version of the story Marcus gave her. And I think when she heard the real version, it shook her. Is she a good woman?" I asked. "I think," Patty said slowly, "she could be. Marcus came to Decker Street on a Saturday. He drove 4 hours. He did not call ahead. He knocked on the door of the small house where he had grown up, and when I opened it, he looked, for the first time in years, like the boy I remembered. Not the doctor, not the man in the expensive suit. The boy. He had been crying. His eyes were red and swollen, and he had clearly not slept well. He said, 'Dad, can I come in?' I stepped back from the door. He came inside. He stood in the living room, the room with the old couch and the family photos on the wall and the small table where Beverly and I had eaten 10,000 meals together, and he looked around at it, all of it, like he was seeing it for the first time, or like he was seeing it again after forgetting what it looked like. His eyes landed on Beverly's photo on the wall, the one from their last Christmas together. He broke. I watched my son, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, fold into himself and cry in a way I had not seen since he was a small boy who had scraped his knee. I did not rush to hold him. I let him stand there and feel it, because sometimes love means letting someone feel the full weight of what they have done before you lift it from them. After a long time, I said, "Sit down, son." He sat on the old couch. I sat across from him. He wiped his face with his sleeve the same way he had done when he was 8. And he said, "Dad, I don't know how to explain what happened to me." "Then don't explain it," I said. "Just tell me the truth." He nodded. He looked at his hands. I was ashamed. He said. The word landed in the room like a stone in still water. "I was ashamed," he said again. "And I know how terrible that is to say. I know what you sacrificed. I knew it even then. Some part of me knew it. But I wanted so badly to be something different, to come from something different. And when I was with Diane's family, with people who had always had money and education and the right clothes and the right words, I just wanted to fit. I wanted to belong." He stopped. "And the easiest way to fit was to make you smaller, to keep you separate from that world, to tell myself that we were too different." I looked at him for a long time. I said, "Marcus, do you know the last thing your mother said to me before she died?" He shook his head. "She said she wasn't worried about whether you'd become a great doctor. She knew you would. She was worried about whether you'd become a good man." He covered his face with both hands. "She loved you completely," I said. "With no conditions. Your grandfather loved you enough to save his whole life's worth so you could have a future. I loved you enough to keep showing up, even when you didn't want me to. Even at that hotel door." I leaned forward. "Love doesn't ask to be impressive, Marcus. It just shows up, sometimes in old trucks, sometimes in polished shoes, sometimes with a card that got written 3 times. He was shaking. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he said. "I am so sorry. The things that cannot be undone and the things that can. I want to tell you the truth about forgiveness. People think forgiveness is a door that swings open easily once someone apologizes. They think sorry is a key. It is not. Forgiveness is more like a house you have to rebuild. It takes time. It takes lumber and nails, and the willingness to keep working even when you are tired. Marcus and we started rebuilding, slowly. He called me the following Sunday, just to talk. Nothing special, just the kind of ordinary conversation that families have. He told me about a patient he had treated that week. I told him about a job I was working on. We talked for 40 minutes. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen, and Beverly's absence felt different somehow. Softer, like even in wherever she was, she knew. The following month, Marcus came back to Decker Street with Diane. Diane shook my hand. Then, perhaps surprising even herself, she hugged me. She said, "Mr. Whitfield, I am sorry for my part in this. I want to do better." I looked at her, really looked at her. "She meant it," I said. "Then we're already doing better. About the loan. People always ask about the loan. Here is what I decided. I called George Totham and told him to draw up a new agreement. Not a forgiveness, not a clean slate, because I do not believe in erasure. The history happened. It is part of the story, but a new agreement. The loan would be restructured as a long-term 0 interest repayment, not of money, but of time. Marcus would come home once a month. He would call every Sunday. He would know the names of his grandfather's stories, of his mother's sacrifices, of the house on Decker Street, and what it took to keep the lights on. He would carry his history with him not as a shame, but as a foundation. That was the repayment. George said, "Harold, that's not a legally enforceable contract." I said, "George, the best ones never are." Patty came for Christmas that year. Marcus and Diane came too. We sat around the table, the same kitchen table, and I looked at my children, and I thought about Beverly, and I thought about my father, and I thought about all the invisible threads that hold a family together, even when someone is pulling hard to break them. After dinner, Marcus helped me with the dishes. We stood side by side at the sink, him washing, me drying the way we had done when he was a boy. He said, "Dad, I need to ask you something." "Ask." "Did you ever think about just walking away after Saturday, after the hotel? Did you ever think enough?" I dried a plate. "Set it on the rack." "Yes," I said. He was quiet. "But here is the thing about being a father," I said. "The love doesn't come with an off switch. Believe me, sometimes you wish it did. Would be a lot simpler." He smiled. "Just a little. The love stays." I said, "What changes is what you do with it. What I want you to take with you. I am 63 years old. My hands are rough. My truck is old. The house on Decker Street still has a leaky faucet. I keep meaning to fix it. But on Sunday evenings now, the phone rings. And that small, ordinary, priceless thing is worth more to me than any scholarship, any diploma, any reception hall with white tablecloths and champagne. I have thought a lot about what this story means, what lesson lives inside it. And here is what I believe. We live in a world that tells us to be ashamed of where we came from, if it is not impressive enough. That tells us to upgrade our lives by trading in the people who built them. That measures worth in credentials and zip codes and the right kind of clothes. But here is the truth that my father knew, that Beverly knew, that I have spent 63 years learning. The people who sacrificed the most for you are rarely the ones in the fancy seats. They are the ones polishing their shoes at midnight. They are the ones writing a card 3 times to get the words right. They are the ones who drive 4 hours and stand at a door and get turned away, and still find a way to love you on the other side of it. Do not wait until you have hurt someone past their limit to remember what they mean to you. Do not wait until the loan comes due to realize that love was never free. It was just given without a bill. Call your people, show up for them, not when it is convenient, not when it costs you nothing. Show up when it is hard. When it is inconvenient, when you are tired, when they embarrass you in front of the people you are trying to impress. Because the people who show up for you when it costs them everything, those are the people who deserve everything you have. Do not realize that when it is too late. Marcus called me last Sunday. We talked for an hour and 12 minutes. He told me about a patient, a young man from a poor neighborhood who had come in scared, alone, without insurance. Marcus had spent extra time with him, had connected him with resources, had made sure he felt seen. When Marcus finished telling me the story, I asked him why he had gone the extra mile. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I thought about Grandpa and Mom and you, and I thought, this kid has someone who polished their shoes for him, someone who drove 4 hours for him, even if he doesn't know it yet. He deserves someone who shows up." I had to set the phone down for a moment. When I picked it back up, I said, "Marcus." He said, "Yeah, Dad." I said, "Your mother would be proud." He said, very quietly, and I heard 40 years of love and loss and forgiveness and grace in those 2 words. He said, "I know, Dad. I know." If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you need to call, or a door you need to walk back through, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new here, subscribe, because every week we bring you stories about the people who love quietly, sacrifice deeply, and never stop showing up. Don't miss the next one.